Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Exchanges program. We are so grateful to be joined today by Matt Haworth. He is the founder of a social enterprise called Reason Digital, and he is here to explain what areas of activity could most benefit from digital and how you can foster a culture that supports doing more with digital in your organization. So without further ado, and one other thing to mention is there will be a Q&A or / discussion at the end, which Matt is going to jump straight into after his presentation. So just make sure you use the chat function to have your general conversations. It's going to be quite interactive. And yeah, so now without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Matt.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can see my slides now that you've seen my face already. So hopefully you can see those. Drop me a chat if you can. So yeah, as Kat said, I am the co-founder of a social enterprise called Reason Digital. I also wrote a book about digital fundraising a few years ago, which yeah, ended up sort of the main textbook, I guess, for how to fundraise digitally. My experience comes from my work in founding Reason Digital and also working with the various charities, big and small, that we've worked with over the 15 years that Reason Digital has been going. Reason Digital supports charities with their digital strategies and the delivery of digital things. However, I'm also a trustee, so I've also seen things from that angle as well, which maybe gives me some extra empathy with some of the constraints that you have. So there's a couple of the organisations that I am on the boards of. So to jump straight in, this digital stuff. What has been going on in digital? Well, at a super high level, really what's been going on for the last kind of 20 years has been a kind of journey really that's been happening from people realizing that digital has a use in terms of marketing. So the first charity websites that were out there were always, things that were just basically talking about what the charity does, but you couldn't really interact with the charity. You couldn't really do anything else. Then we started to realize that, people can actually put the credit cards in, websites like Amazon started to appear. And then we realized, fundraising, this is a big deal for digital. We can actually ask people for donations online. Things like Just Giving emerged, and the rest is history, so to speak. Where we are now is in this kind of era of service delivery, and this is where charities have started to realize that we could actually achieve our mission and deliver our mission digitally. We can actually reach people online. We can actually help them and support them. So we can talk about it, we can raise funds and support for it, and we can do it all online. Really where we were pre-pandemic is really stuck just before this service delivery thing, or just a little bit into the service delivery thing, where some charities were starting to do it, but a lot of charities were really feeling a lot of barriers towards doing that. And there was a real sense that the sector had stalled for a few years. But then COVID happened, and suddenly the only way to reach people was digital. The only way to kind of reach our service users was through their computers, through their smartphones, and everything changed. We did some research at Reason Digital during the pandemic about how people's behavior in terms of how they were interacting with charities had changed. It's no great surprise to know that people were giving less money because they weren't bumping into street fundraisers, they weren't running marathons, things like that. But online donations rose a little bit. It wasn't an even playing field though. Some charities benefited massively and some charities lost out from that. Some of that was to do with the cause areas that they were working within. If you were working within healthcare, one of the NHS charities, etc., you were more likely to benefit. However, another huge factor was how well geared you were to do digital fundraising to begin with. If you'd invested time in building an audience already and you had tools available for people to fundraise for you, then we saw those organizations much more likely to win and to benefit from what happened with COVID, because they unknowingly laid the groundwork for the catastrophe that was about to happen. We also found that user behavior changed as well. So end users started to use technology more. They sent more messages, used social media more, and made more video calls. This has declined slightly since the return to normal, if we could call what's going on right now normal. However, it's not declined completely. So what we've seen is society has been digitally transformed further by experiencing the pandemic, not just the sector. And that's one of the key reasons why we need to kind of keep up the pace of change. Startlingly, by summer 2020, around 2/3 of charities were delivering all of their work remotely, predominantly using digital tools. So this was a huge tectonic shift in the sector. And charities that already were delivering things digitally. So one example, an organization that we've worked with turned to us, who give fantastic advice to people on benefits or who could receive benefits, and they give them financial advice, release some data around their levels of demand through one of their services, which is an online tool that allows people to calculate what benefits they should be entitled to. We can see across every single group of users, they saw a massive increase in demand for that. And they also broke that down by different types of user, and you can see the difference in demand there, that every group rose, but certain groups rose much larger than others. Interestingly, private tenants being the most affected, next mortgaged homeowners. What I wanted to do, that's kind of the background. What I wanted to do next is basically just get a feel for where we're at as organizations with digital and how our kind of progress has been going. So what I'd like you to do is find this option, which I've got a screenshot on screen now of the annotate button. So you should be able to see at the top of the screen, you're viewing Matt Haworth's screen, and then it should have a view options, little drop down. You press annotate on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to play bingo. So I've created a little bingo card of some things that charities might be doing or outcomes that might happen for charities digitally. What I want you to try doing is use the stamp feature. So if you go into annotate, there's a little button called stamp that has a tick on it. And you can press that, and that will allow you to put a stamp on the screen that everyone else can see. So huge power there, wield it responsibly. But I want you to try and pop a little, I'll let you choose. You can pop a little tick or a heart or a star or anything you want really in some of the squares that that represent things that you've managed to achieve online. So open up the window, that's view options, annotate, and see how you get on. Let's see if we can get anybody to admit to us that they have achieved some of the things on here. That'll give me a really good sense of where to focus on for the rest of the time. Let's view options, annotate. I'll just give you a minute to see if anybody is brave enough to try that out. Okay, can't see the annotate option. So you might need to hover up to the top of the screen, maybe, but you should see a green band that says you're viewing Matt Haworth's screen. Then there should be a little drop down that says annotate rather. No annotate option. Okay, maybe we're having a few tech issues. So maybe let me know in chat if any of these stand out to you, and I can help guide the rest of the session that way. So let me know if you've done any of these things. Just pop a little message in the chat. What's been your kind of biggest or proudest kind of digital outcome? Have you delivered a service digitally yet? Have you had an online trustee meeting? Has somebody, have you had a really significant donation online? Let me know in the chat. I will move on from this since we're having a few techie issues. Oh, somebody managed to do a tick. I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. Ta-da. So yeah, great to hear, Michelle, that you're delivering a service part digitally there. I think that's a position that a lot of charities are actually. They're kind of migrating the services, and part of that journey is digital and part of it isn't. So what I want to talk about next is really what to kind of keep up with. So we've experienced a great deal of change during the pandemic, where suddenly charities are more capable of delivering digital than they ever were before. It feels like all the old barriers, boundaries, excuses, limitations kind of fell away, and people just ran at the objective of how can we as a sector, how can we as nonprofits actually adapt to digital and do more with digital. I've talked to dozens, if not hundreds of people in organizations that experience that process, and I've drawn together 5 key lessons from that period, 5 things I think that the organizations that really kind of succeeded in that period did. So for you, what this is these might be things that you do, or you did, or you understand already, in which case those are things I'm really recommending you really try desperately to hang on to now we're moving out of the pandemic, because it will be so easy to go back to business as usual. However, there may be some things in here that you aren't doing yet and that are not embedded within your organization, in which case I really recommend you trying these out. And I've illustrated all of these with practical examples from charities at a range of sizes and nonprofits at a range of sizes. So hopefully there'll be something here for everybody. So my first recommendation really is about the very things that we choose to kind of make digital within our organization, where we go with it. Many of us now will have a website, we'll have social media and whatnot. We'll have that kind of sorted out to a degree. But what about the things that aren't online? Services that are not available online, fundraising avenues that you can't take advantage of online. What is it that we should prioritize doing digitally? The first point really is choosing to do things where digital can not just do it, but actually maybe even do it better in some ways than offline activity. I think a really good example of this is an example I saw from Auditory Verbal UK, who their tagline is creating a sound future for deaf children. So they have advisors, experts that parents with deaf children can go to those sessions and have an in-person advice session regularly with one of those workers. What they did during lockdown, of course, was switch to doing these things on Zoom. You might think, well, that's not as good because it's not as fun seeing somebody on Zoom as it is face-to-face. But what they actually found was that getting to see how parents interacted with their children in the home and being able to draw in activities that happened around that person's home really gave them a new dimension on that family's life and allowed them to really tailor interventions, recommendations, which ended up being more useful to parents than perhaps they could have been before. It also gave workers an insight into what the life of parents was like day to day, which helped them to kind of improve their practice and recommendations. So there's a really good example of digital doing something better. An example of where digital doesn't do better, and it's using the exact same technology, Zoom, is in peer-to-peer and mutual aid groups. So let's say we have a group of people in recovery from addiction, and they used to meet once or twice a week, and they would share stories, they would chat to each other. Just translating that digitally will be doing something that digital doesn't really do very well, because what you would end up with is a bunch of people in a Zoom conference not really being able to kind of network or empathize with each other in quite the same way, and where everybody was forced to listen to just one person at once, where in a real group, splinter conversations could happen. So we found charities that tried to do this didn't really succeed. However, there were some kind of encouraging signs where people tried doing things like group chats and WhatsApp groups. So that looked very different. It didn't look like a meeting like the offline thing looked like, but it actually worked just as well because we leaned into what digital does best. So you've really got to think about, is this something that will be the same when it's translated digitally, or something better, or will we actually make it worse? And if we make it worse, should we do it in a slightly different way using different tools? A really quite interesting example of this is in some of the work that we did with the organisation that until recently was called Mary Stopes International, they're now called MSI. And they, due to changes in legislation at the beginning of the pandemic, we worked with them to help understand how they could deliver a user journey for their at-home abortion pill service. So even things that might feel kind of unimaginable that you could deliver those services digitally or remotely, some organizations have been able to find ways to do that. And actually women that reported kind of signing up online for these pills, having chats available online and support available, clear instructions online, somebody could reach out to online. They reported that they actually preferred this than going into a clinic. Obviously, everybody's different, but the majority of respondents said that they preferred doing this at home. So they actually stumbled upon an improved process there that actually cost less money to deliver, and service users prefer it, which is pretty amazing, especially for something like that. So that's point one. Point two is about Agile. I'm sure you're all sick to absolute bloody death of people in glasses like me banging on about how you should be more agile. So I will spare you. I'll spare you the evangelism. But I think there's some really good examples of real agility, and I'm going to define what I mean by that shortly, in the charity sector that really made a huge difference to people receiving services. So there's a social enterprise called Growing Links, and they connect communities through food, and they had a kind of a food donation program. They used social media and monitored hashtags and reached out to organizations to see which organizations needed food donations. So you could kind of tweet with a particular hashtag and they would pick that up. They then used Crowdfunder to raise money, and they also used Google Docs as a way to kind of coordinate and collaborate behind the scenes. So all of these tools are basically free, and they managed to kind of adopt and utilize these tools right at the start of the pandemic to really effectively deliver a food distribution process without needing to write a big specification for a database or go to an agency and spend a lot of money getting something programmed. And this is a really good example of somebody being agile, because they're doing the bare minimum thing they need to get going and get going quickly. And then once they've done that, they can learn from it. Another example of this, which is taken from my work, is with the Scouts. We do a lot of the kind of digital transformation for the Scouts. So right at the start of the pandemic, we helped them kind of pivot so that they launched this Great Indoors campaign, where we created a database for them online of all the different scouting activities that you could do with your kids inside as a parent, to keep scouting going and keep contributing to your child learning towards achieving badges and participating with the Scouts. We also very rapidly created with them a digital fundraising product, which was Race Around the World, where Scout groups got sponsored to do a certain number of miles, and we visualized those on the map in terms of how many times around the world all the different Scout groups around the world would have got. And this raised hundreds of thousands of pounds within just 1 month, which went to the most vulnerable Scout groups that were affected by the pandemic. And I think we turned this around in 3 days, because we were using technology that was, already existing, things like Google Maps, things that we kind of had on the shelf. So that's another example of Agile. So really, how working Agile benefits us when we're trying to do digital work. If we think, instead of thinking about digital, we think about making a car. Let's say you wanted to build a car instead of building a website or a digital service. The normal way to do it would be to design it piece by piece and piece it together, like you can see on the diagram on your screen right now. The way I would recommend you building a digital service, though, is not like that at all. It would be something a bit more like this. So you would think, why are we making a car? Why are we making a digital service? Well, we're making a car because we want to get people from A to B. I would then think, what is the quickest and cheapest way to get people from A to B? Ideally, something that we could do ourselves internally as an organization. And in this case, it would be to screw 4 wheels to a plank and call it a skateboard, and then give people a skateboard. We would then give people a skateboard, and we would get some feedback from them. And they might say to us, well, I like the skateboard, but it's a bit difficult to steer. So maybe we put a steering handle on it and it becomes a scooter, and so on and so forth, until we end up with a car. And the car might actually look different to what it did before, because we had such great feedback about being out in the open air. People love that. So we've actually ended up at a different endpoint where we've got a convertible car now. And also, another good point about this is we've delivered value right from the first step. With this diagram up here with the car, we've had to wait from the start to the end of the process many years until we have given somebody assistance in getting from A to B. With the diagram at the bottom, pretty much in the first week, we've given them something that's helped improve things, and it's helped give us that learning. Now, this is a standard process in companies now and to produce commercial products, but actually we're charities. And so I wanted to add a little bit to this kind of diagram, which is, it's really important that we make sure that whatever we're kind of putting out there is safe, and that appropriate kind of protocols and policies are in place to ensure the safety of people using those things. So in our case, that might be giving a helmet away with the skateboard, and making sure that's factored in. The next thing I want to talk about is how we can research user continuously. So something that charities did that really won during the pandemic is they kept talking to their service users, to their supporters, to their trustees, to their team about what life was like, how it had changed. What the pandemic did was give us lots of sort of worries, I suppose, that we didn't even understand what life was like for our service users anymore. So we had to start asking them. And this process of asking people what their life is like, it massively increases the success of any digital work that you do. Take Wellchild, for example, which is a charity that we do a lot of the digital stuff for and digital innovation work with. They had a Facebook group called Family Tree, which is a Facebook group where they have about 900 parents, family members of very sick children. These parents are often spending up to 18 hours a day caring for their kids. And they were asking each other questions online about what the impact of COVID was, how they could get their pharmacy deliveries, whether they were still allowed to kind of go out for walks with their kids, stuff like that. And Wellchild monitored that group, and on their website created a COVID resource hub, which answered all those questions and actually took some of the recommendations from other parents and used that as part of the content. So by listening to what their service users wanted and reacting to that really quickly, they were able to deliver something that really delivered a lot of social impact for their families in quite a quick pace at quite low cost. You can also use this continuous user research thing for more involved projects than just pulling together things on your website. So, for example, we work for Medicines for Children. They wanted to digitize their website into an app, or sort of re-digitize, I should say. Their website is kind of a list of lots of leaflets about different medication given to very sick children. So what we did is we didn't just take that for granted and go for it. We actually asked a bunch of parents who utilized those medications to keep a diary. And all we did with that is we just set up a WhatsApp conversation with them and said, just drop any photos, thoughts, recordings, anything you want that kind of gives us an insight into your day. You can see on screen here some of the photographs that we got. Diaries here of all the routines and care routines that people have to do with their children. You can see that's running from the early hours of the morning all the way to late at night. This was quite an interesting one where somebody had taken a picture of all the different medication there and put a sticker on it that said tired and the time to show us that it was 4 minutes to midnight. And they included a screenshot of their alarms for medication, which end at midnight and start at 6 a.m. So we got tons of insight into what it was like to be one of these service users. And by talking to them about this, we discovered, in these conversations that they didn't actually want an app that had all the medicine leaflets on. They wanted an app to help track what medicines they needs to give when the stock of that medicine was running low, and crucially to be able to hand over this care routine to somebody doing respite care for their child so that they could take a break without worry. So really, we found what people wanted was not a bunch of leaflets. They wanted to take a break without worry. And that's what we designed for instead. And that is what you will get if you do continuous user research. Digital gives you a way to do it. Loads of charities have to be really thrifty about this, using WhatsApp groups, doing digital surveys, looking on forums. Keep doing that, even though the pandemic's over. It's such a great, quick, cost-effective way to understand the audience that you're targeting, whether that's for fundraising, whether that's for service delivery, any initiative at all. We even continued doing that research remotely after the app was made. We did remote interviews with parents to get them to try using the app and give us feedback on it. So it can just be something you can do continuously. Another thing a lot of charities started to do with the digital that I noticed they didn't do before is ask for help. So a lot of the time, the big barrier nonprofits were facing with the digital was feeling like they didn't have the funds or resources to actually meet their aspirations. So there was a lot of kind of emphasis on fundraising, trying to secure sign-off for boards of trustees for funds, things like that. Well, obviously, funds are important. So I want to talk to you about where you might be able to get some of those funds and thoughts about that first. On your screen now is a bunch of organizations that provide funding for digital projects to charities. These slides, I think, will be distributed. There'll be a recording of this talk as well. So no need to furiously scribble them all down, but maybe just, take note of one or two, maybe have a little Google whilst I'm speaking. But a lot of these funders mainly fund kind of innovation work. And actually, you could ask other people for help funding your digital aspirations, not just innovation funders. So innovation funders are obviously going to be interested in kind of sexy new ideas, risky things that might have a big payoff if they work. But actually, that's not going to be the whole of your work as an organization. Sometimes you just need some help with your internal IT, with getting like Microsoft Teams sorted out, or maybe you need help with a fundraising campaign, digitizing that. This is where other funding types can come in really handy. There are funders out there that provide funding for infrastructure and capacity, yet a lot of nonprofits don't think of digital as a key part of their infrastructure or as a key way to build capacity. So when you see those funds about building capacity and infrastructure, don't just think, buying computers, buying a van, investing in staff training. Think about, well, this could actually deliver, digital transformation for us so that we could deliver our services more effectively, or, build our capacity to fundraise online or whatever it is. The third form of funding you could consider is your core delivery funding. Who is it that's funding you to actually do these services and deliver this work? Could you, just like you might be applying for funds to deliver your services in Southeast England, could you apply to the same funder to deliver your services digitally for communities that aren't able to reach your in-person services? Or could you write into that bid for delivering a service in the Southeast a line that is about making a digital service available for people that aren't able to access your centres in the Southeast? You'd be really surprised how few nonprofits actually think of digital as so separate. They forget to do this. And if you can do this, you can enable incremental digital transformation because you're getting a little bit of money for it with each bid or each pot that you're going for. Oops. There's a lot of companies that are willing to give away their products for free as well, shrink-wrapped kind of products. So Microsoft, you might not know, but Microsoft Teams, Office, etc. If you're a charity, you can get it for free. So make sure that you look into those deals. There's a stuff that you may be paying for as part of your digital that you could actually get for free if you just ask, even if it doesn't advertise on the website. A cheeky email, half the time seems to give good results in my experience. So if there's a bit of software you can't afford or costs you a lot of money, try asking the company. One example of us doing this that had a really big impact was our work with Age UK. So we built a platform for them to address the chronic loneliness and isolation of older people in the UK. This is Barbara that you can see on screen. She lost her husband and her daughter to cancer within months of each other and was left desperately lonely. Her entire remaining family died within months. It's hard to imagine just how isolated that would make you feel. And she described just feeling like she was just wandering around in this thick fog of loneliness, not knowing what to do. And it's for people like Barbara that we made this service where people could sign up to be a volunteer befriender on the telephone. And we matched volunteer befrienders with older people in a kind of matching database. And then we triggered a phone call once a week at a time that they both told us they were mutually available. And the phone just connected those calls. We didn't need to share the volunteer or the older person's number. So that made it safer from a safeguarding perspective and enabled more people to sign up to the service because a big DBS check wasn't required. That was great because it allowed Age UK to transition from doing a few dozen calls a week to highly DBS checked volunteers to doing hundreds of calls a week. But what we found was that we got into a bottleneck, and that bottleneck was the fact that all these calls are recorded, and Age UK was getting its staff to listen to all those recordings to check them for safeguarding problems. So what happened next was that we looked at who their corporate supporters were. We found one of them was Credit Suisse. And we knew that because Credit Suisse is a big bank, they would have anti-fraud teams, data teams, security teams. And we said to them, we know that you've given Age UK quite a lot of support this year because you selected Age UK as your charity of the year. Would you give us a bunch of your best brainiacs in kind of fraud, risk, and data? Give us a handful of those. Let us lock them in a room for a day or two. We'll provide pizza and a really interesting problem for them to solve. And they were more than happy to do that. And what happened was we worked with their team, and their team produced an artificial intelligence which listens to those phone calls and automatically scores them in terms of safeguarding risk based on a number of factors. And it identifies which factors has been triggered. That allows the team at Age UK to listen to only the riskiest calls, and they also listen to a random sample of other calls as well, and remove this bottleneck. Since the start of the pandemic, Age UK has now run over 400,000 of these volunteer befriending calls through this system. And it just wouldn't have been possible to get to that scale had we not asked for help from a company who was more than happy to provide it simply for the price of a few pizzas. My last point, before I open up for questions and discussion, is that maybe the most important thing to hang on to at all is a digital culture. There was so much it was so easy just to say no to any form of digital investment, digital change. Will our service users be online? Our services rely on face-to-face. What if somebody misuses the service? Is it really safe? All these barriers, all these anxieties. And actually, when it came down to it with COVID, we just had to do it. We just had to find a way. We just had to blast through that. And what that created was a digitally friendly culture where somebody could say, I've got an idea about how we could do this online. And the rest of the organization got behind it and said, yes, go do that. Where somebody said, I know how to set up a chat room on WhatsApp for these vulnerable service users. And someone else said, yeah, go for it, because we can't get them help otherwise. That is the most precious thing of all. You could hang on to that culture and keep it, even though there's not a pandemic, because actually you always could decide to work like that. It just took a pandemic to force the rest of the team to accept it. And some people have been doing this for years. A friend of mine, Robert Green, who was innovation lead at Cancer Research UK, talks about how he was forced to actually work remotely at some point, and all of the tools and working styles that he discovered through that were things that made them a better team and things that he'd hung on to. So what I want you to do is be more Robert Green here and think all of this stuff has actually made us better. Not only the tools that we found, but the very way that we have worked together, the way that we've empowered people that know how to do digital and just supported them to get on with it. That's brilliant. So do think about this. There's really amazing examples of charities delivering their entire organizations remotely, delivering services, workshops, things that were used to only be able to happen face to face now can happen either face to face or online or a mix. Charities reaching new audiences in parts of the country they were never able to operate in. Whole, thousands, probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the UK getting extra help that they would not have done before because charities were able to change their style and be able to deliver digitally. Loads of people supporting charities in new ways who weren't supporting us before. If we can just hang on to that digital culture, then we can be ready for the next thing that happens and be in a really good position instead of on the back foot. Hopefully it won't be another COVID pandemic, although I did write these slides before monkeypox was a word that was in common usage, but it seems that the signs of that are good. But really, that is the key lesson I think we can get out of this is we always had the capability to do more with digital. For whatever reason, we or our organization were stopping us. We can make a choice not to do that. We can make a choice to do more and focus on this more. Hopefully that is 5 really practical ways that you can do that. We now have time for discussion. So I would love you to use the chat box. You can select to send a message to everyone, as well as just the host and panelists. So feel free to use that chat window there to talk to us, and I can answer your questions. You can also raise your hand as well, and I can allow you to speak to the group. So feel free to pop your hand up if you've got a question, or you've got maybe a challenge that your organization's faced, or you want to have an argument with me about something I've said. I quite enjoy that as well. So don't be shy. Do let us know. Perhaps you want to share with the group something that you've done during the pandemic or recently that's really helped you as well, a real success you've had digitally. So just feel free to raise your hand, or just send a message to me if you can't see the option to speak to everybody. So Tasha asks, what calling service did we use to trigger calls to both people? So we built that off the back of a telephony platform called Twilio. I'm going to get you a link to that actually. They have a non-profit foundation as well as doing discounts for non-profits. So their main bread and butter is like call centers and stuff like that they help enable them to run loads of calls. But we used it in a different way for charity there. And we've done a number of these kind of telephone services. So we have quite a lot of technology that we've built that we've got on the shelf. So if you were interested in kind of doing something like that for your service users, then feel free to reach out to me, and maybe I can kind of help give you a head start or a leg up with that. Yes, Michelle says, it's disappointing that on a digital webinar, the digital technology hasn't worked as you wanted it to. That is definitely something that you get used to working in digital, that nothing works quite as you expect. Apologies that you've had an issue there, but feel free to use the chat function to ask me a question or share something, or just pop your hand up and you'll be able to speak to everybody in the group with your voice. Imagine that. Anyone else got any questions or challenges I can help them with? So Michelle, you should be able to speak to us now. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I work for a rape and sexual abuse charity, and before the pandemic, we delivered all our counselling sessions face to face. Obviously, went into lockdown, we needed to quickly respond. So we first introduced telephone counselling, and at the same time as making sure that all the counsellors were okay with doing online counselling, we rolled that out. Now, obviously, some of our clients didn't have the digital technology at home. Quite a lot of others didn't have confidential space at home to be talking about their sexual abuse. One of the things that we've done is, for those that actually want to have their counselling online because they just find it better for them not to be doing it face to face, we we bought some laptops that they could come in to use our counselling room, but still have their session online, which may seem a bit weird, but it was because they wanted to have it online, but just didn't have the space, and that's working really well. Just them coming and using our digital technology.
That's a great example. Thanks for sharing that, Michelle. It's a really good example of something unexpected where you're blending the best aspects of digital and the best aspects of kind of in person there. That's really creative. I know as well that for in counselling situations, what we found working with organisations to deliver that is that online counselling has enabled some people to access counselling that would have just never done it otherwise, either because it feels less threatening or because they weren't physically able to get to the centre, but they did have privacy at home. But one thing that I think has been really interesting is that it's allowed people to connect to specialist counsellors that they might not have in their area, but they can actually connect to somebody that might have a real specialism, or it might just be perhaps they want to speak to a counsellor who's a person of colour because they're a person of colour, and that's allowed them to kind of make that connection.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, we've started doing face-to-face sessions again, but actually most of our sessions are still online or telephone because that's what our clients want. And when you've just had a very distressing session talking about your sexual violence that's happened to you, the last thing that a lot of them want to do is to then have to walk out of that counselling room and go and get on a bus, so it's really good that they can just move from one area of their home to another, make themselves a cuppa, so it's been really good. We'll not go back.
Awesome. That's really good to hear. I think that's a really great example of you being agile, trying something out, seeing how it worked, and then running with it and building on it. So yeah, thanks very much. What's your organisation called, Michelle, out of interest?
It is Sheffield Rape and Sexual Abuse Centre. We're part of the Rape Crisis England and Wales network.
Cool, thanks for that. So yeah, one for other people to check out, see what you're doing on your website maybe. Anyone else that's got any other questions or anything they'd like to share with the group? Don't be shy.
Matt, we've had a question come in on email for you, and it says, what is the best way, because a lot of platforms come up such as Miro, which is obviously quite new. Would you recommend any websites or social media channels to find out what the sort of latest software is that sort of people are using, as people might not maybe be familiar with what Slack is and things like that? Do you have any advice on how to find those?
It's a great question. I'm not actually sure that there is a good resource for that. Maybe somebody should make one, or maybe I'm not aware of it. If anybody knows of one, then maybe feel free to share it in the chat. But the general way that I find out about these things is just in talking to a lot of peers and colleagues. And I think that's something that digital really enables. Actually, there's quite a lot of forums. So there's like a great Facebook group for charity fundraisers, for example, where people regularly share different tools and different platforms they discovered on there. So trying to find your kind of online community of practice, searching Facebook groups, searching for a LinkedIn group to join and participate in can be really good. I know there's also some kind of WhatsApp groups and Slack groups where people hang out that have the same job title in charities. So there's ones for heads of digital in charities, for example. So checking some of those spaces out would be good. For those of you that don't know, Slack is an online chat platform that allows you to kind of bring together a bunch of people to chat. So a lot of businesses use it as their kind of chat system. Now that everybody's working out of the office, it allows people to keep talking to each other. Miro and a similar tool, Mural, are online whiteboards. So you can get people to have like an online workshop where they can put virtual post-it notes on a virtual whiteboard and share images and write notes and stuff. And they can actually be really powerful ways to workshop with people that you would never be able to get in a room otherwise. So those could be prospective service users or supporters who are very busy or live remotely, and also subject matter experts. So, there might be preeminent academics working in your field that would participate in those workshops if asked. We find they tend to be flattered to be asked and want to do that, but perhaps they live in different countries or different geographies. So using those online tools is not just a rubbish second best to an in-person post-it note session, but is actually sometimes a better alternative because you can change the people that you get in that room. So yeah, there's a couple of tips on tools. Any other questions come through there, Kat, or I'll give people a last chance to raise their hand to share something, or to ask, or to drop a chat before we wrap up, maybe.
There doesn't seem to be any more on email, but obviously you've got your Twitter handle up there and your email. So if people can't think of anything to think in this moment, I'm sure they'll have questions after the session, and they know how to reach you. And obviously, if anyone wants to get hold of anyone at Ethical Property, we can obviously pass on any questions as well. We'll make sure to share the slides afterwards.
Yeah, do feel free to reach out on those channels. This is what I love doing, so it's no imposition at all. Just drop me a tweet or an email. I'll be more than happy to kind of get back to you with whatever advice I can. You're all doing amazing things in the world, so it would be my privilege to help you out if there's any barriers with digital that's kind of getting in the way of you doing more of that good stuff.
Amazing. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That was so good, Matt. So thank you so much for giving that presentation. So much useful information in there that I'm sure many people will be able to use. And thanks to everyone again for joining us today. And we will be sending out information for our next event shortly. So yeah, everyone take care, and we hope to see you soon in the next one. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.